Hey, hello.
Hello, hello.
Wow, it's good to be in person.
It's awesome to be in person. And you're all here. This is amazing. Like we're
Everybody good? Happy? Healthy? So, why don't we give a little context before we jump into a deeper conversation about the future of IP and gaming and film and television? Let's talk a little bit about how we met.
yeah.
Right? Do
That's
you remember
perfect.
what year it was?
So we met, oh man,
Is it 18?
it's going to be 18,
Yeah,
right? I think it was
2018?
spring of 18.
Yeah, we were working. It was Infinity War. I was
Yeah,
working
so
on
you were
Infinity
working on
War.
Infinity War.
And we were gonna do a Marvel Fortnite team up. We're gonna have Thanos in the game. I'm trying to remember.
Well, even how that started. So
Yeah.
this is, okay, so we were.
Oh yes, you got this.
So this
Yeah.
is, we're probably, I don't know, 6, 7 months into Fortnite at that point, right? And so Fortnite is kind of blowing up. At that point, we're probably, oh man, I'm gonna get so many of these numbers wrong, but we're probably 60 to 80 million players at that point. It's like, it's a big thing. Like the comet had just hit, and like really people were seeing kind of what some of our plans were for like where we wanted to take what the experience of Fortnite could be. And I was talking with some of the folks at Disney, and they're like, hey, what if there was this thing? And I'm like, well, that's not like how we kind of approach the world and the universe and kind of the conceit of what Fortnite is. It just doesn't really work in any of these things. I'm like, but if Joe Russo called me, I'm like, I'm sure we could figure out something to do. And they're like, ha 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 ha, Joe Russo's never gonna call you. I'm like, okay, well, whatever. And then I actually don't know the next part of the story, because then like the next night,
Yeah.
I get this phone call from you.
From me. I can't remember if I saw something on social media. I don't remember what it was, but or we might have posted something saying we were Fortnite fans.
This feels right. I think this is true.
Something like
actually.
that. It was
Yeah.
a social media thing, and then. But what I think is relevant about the story is that we met trying to cross-pollinate two massive pieces of IP
That's
in
right.
Fortnite and Avengers, and it's a significant time in the business. I think the pandemic sort of stalled things and maybe accelerated other things, accelerated disruption, that's for sure. But we were heading on a trajectory where we were starting to explore creative ways to blend IP. And also, Donald and I just started having dinners together, getting on the phone, and talking about what the future of IP creation and IP management was. And a lot of it had to do with technology and Epic's Unreal Engine, and how content could be produced more efficiently in the future. And it led us into all kinds of conversations, and now here we are together sitting on a stage talking to you guys, pretty much how we talk to each other at dinner. So
I mean, that's really kind of what it is. Like, we've really just become really good friends over the last couple of years, and we have dinner a lot, and we talk a lot, and that's kind of what this is. It's just we're all just hanging out and talking about what the future of entertainment could be.
we'll open up to questions near the end, so if anybody has any questions, you can ask it. But let's talk a little bit about building universes. Let's talk about building IP. We both have very different experiences, right? Yours on the gaming front, mine on the cinematic universe front. Talk a little bit about Fortnite. Talk a little bit about how you built that and where you see it going from here, and what sort of questions have been answered along the way, new discoveries that have been made along the way.
Yeah, so that's interesting, because I think actually a lot of us here probably come from the gaming side of things, and I've been making games for almost 25 years at this point, and I've had a lot of different opportunities to kind of just try different things, and with Fortnite, it felt like we had this really unique opportunity to kind of approach something at least a little different than I had ever approached something, where instead of looking at the IP through the lens of character, which is how you really, I think, look at a lot of IP development, right? It's like you look at it through the lens of like when you're thinking of Extraction or the Marvel stuff or Star Wars, like it's really Luke and Leia and Han, and like looking at it through that lens. And with Fortnite, it was like, well, what if we created an IP around the idea of the place is really like the main character. Like, what if the island was the main character, and we always, whenever you enter through the lens of Fortnite, you are always you. So like, you might dress up as Spider-Man or Batman or Boba Fett, but you are always you. Like, we never take your agency away from you, which is something that I think is very different than the medium of linear entertainment, where I think actually a lot of how you can empathize with characters on a screen is because you're actually removed from that. You're not in direct control of them. And so that was just like a really fascinating experiment for us on the Fortnite side, was to try that. And I think that's been a really kind of key reason why it's resonated the way it has, which is kind of, I think, unique to the medium of interactivity, where that it just wouldn't work when you're trying to tell someone a story.
Yeah, I think it's, you're right? Like, you don't sit down and go, how do I create some, IP that's going to get supercharged and everybody's going to fall in love with. You have to go, what's the story I'm telling and who's it about? And if you build it around a really compelling story and a character that you care about and the audience cares about, that you love, that they'll love, right? Like, Star Wars doesn't work without Luke Skywalker or Han Solo or Princess Leia. So there's a world of characters there, and they're existing in this fantastical place, and some of them represent you, and some of them represent who you'd like to be, and some of them represent who you'd like to fall in love with, and so they all have different facets of your personality expressed, but they live in this really rich, detailed, compelling place that isn't here.
That's right.
And I think that's an important, essential part of IP building. And when we always would start to get into these conversations, start to talk about the sort of headier elements of where all the stuff was going, some of the things that we're compelled by are, where technology can take us. And there's a lot of like buzzwords floating around now, and people are grabbing onto things that people in the gaming space have been, working on for years, and metaverse is now a buzz term, which is really, I don't know, a stand-in for, I don't know, a business plan, I guess, I don't know. But it's virtual worlds for us. It's the things that we want to swim around in. And I think the things you and I have always been compelled by are, how do we take all of these things and connect them? And so we can have, because I think there's a correlation between emotional investment and audience appreciation, right? So the higher their emotional investment in what you're doing, the more impactful the experience, right? Avengers Endgame doesn't work without 10 years and 22 movies or 21 movies preceding it. Doesn't work. That's not a 2.5-hour experience that works.
That's
right? If it's a standalone and I have to build out all those characters and make you care about them all in those 2.5 hours, it's impossible. So the grand experiment with Marvel that was really compelling is they said, hey, let's give you let's see what time investment does to the audience. My brother and I came in and went, oh, that's a really cool idea. Okay, so if we're playing with time, well, what if we kill half the characters, in 2018, and then make you wait till 2019 to find out what happened to all of them? And so that's really what we just started playing around, this idea of like emotional investment, time investment, which led to a lot of conversations between us about where this all goes.
That's right. And so, I think it's so exactly right what you're saying, because I think that I keep wanting to use Star Wars as an example because neither of us have worked on it yet in an official capacity, right? But I think, at least for me, when I walked out of that theater of seeing, for me it was actually Empire. When I walked out of Empire, I was just like, I was shaken emotionally by the world, by the characters, by what had happened. But I walked out of that movie going, I want to go to that place. And it was interesting because it wasn't like I was like, I want to be Luke Skywalker. I was like, I want to be a Jedi, or maybe I want to be that crazy looking bounty hunter I saw back there. It was through that journey with the characters, like you were saying, that led me to be like, I want to just be part of that world. And I think that the fusion of those potential things is the magical thing. Like, if you could have walked out of Empire and been like, I want to go to that place, and then you could go to that place, that would, I think, be the ultimate kind of magic trick.
And that's where we're heading,
And
right?
that's where we're heading.
I mean, like these superhero films weren't feasible on this scale 20 years ago. They're feasible on the scale now because of technology, right? I couldn't have made Endgame 20 years ago. It'd been too expensive. It probably wouldn't have, you know, felt as sort of seamless on the CG front, right? The photorealism wouldn't have been there the same way. Same's true for gaming. Whether you're playing around in the photoreal space or, you know, graphics are still an important part of it. Like, how do I immerse myself? And maybe that's a key term here is immersion, right? Because it's about is your desire for immersion is what IP really is. And when we talk about IP, what we're really talking about. And I think what we're compelled by at Agbo, and I know we've had many conversations with you guys at Epic about this, is, well, how does a film relate to a TV show, relate to a game, relate to a virtual experience? And can you, as we start to become more advanced, collateralize your assets across all those silos and increase the production quality of your TV show because you typically spend more money on a film. So I could take all those assets that I spent a bunch of money in film on and I could put them in a TV show that I have a cheaper budget on and make that TV show look really good. And then those could be converted to gaming, or we could start with a game and then those gaming assets could go to the film, right? And then everything goes to the virtual world, right? Whatever that ends up being, that virtual experience, that immersive experience, whether I put on my
That's
VR
totally
headset, right?
No, so what I call that, and what I think we kind of talk about internally at Epic, is this idea of the unified asset pipeline, which is exactly what you're saying. Like, imagine, and it could be, I think, any game engine, but in my mind, the operating system of the future is a real-time game engine. Like,
Right.
the future is
photoreal real time.
photoreal real time. Like,
That's the game changer.
that's the game changer, and the future is rendered in real time. And all of us in this room, like, we have so much more experience using real time than I think most of the world, right? And that's why I think we are going to be the industry that really revolutionizes everything, not just entertainment.
Transmedia, I mean, all of it. I mean, yeah, you'll pull the world forward in a way that, you know, Facebook can't. You can tell I got a thing against Facebook. They destroyed the world, and now they're going to create a metaverse that we can all escape to.
You're not supposed to give away the plot of your next movie,
Right.
Joe. Come on.
But I think what is compelling, and I've said this a lot, like having worked in the traditional studio space and now having worked with gaming companies, I think that the revolution comes from the gaming side because that's where the technology is. And traditional film studios do not understand, nor is it part of their business plan to curate technology, house it, pay for its development, hang on to it, right? That is a third-party business. And, you know, Epic is driven, you know, you guys spend a lot of money on the Unreal Engine because it's a core piece of your business, and it will drive a lot of your business moving forward.
Yeah, that's true. No, and I think, like, again, even just what you're just talking about, let's move it to how you even make a movie, right? Or a show or whatever at this point. You're developing your treatments, you're developing your scripts, you're probably doing storyboards and previs and all of that. But imagine if you could start to block out, you know, if that whole sequence at the end of Endgame where, you know, Avengers headquarters has been destroyed and Thanos is there, and like you could have started to model that out very, very blocky in an engine early on and done crazy like location scouting in that place. And then as you're doing your previs and whatever, you could probably even have used that to then go use some of like some of the different LED screen technology now, where that same asset that you're using for your previs location scouting is now high res enough and photorealistic enough looking that you can now shoot against it. And then it's becoming like what they can use in layers to create final pixels for, like, it just
Right.
becomes this asset that works the whole way through. And then you now have that asset that you could then give, and we've done this. Like, one of the reasons, there's lots of amazing people working on it, but one of the reasons we were able to get really high quality Fortnite toys to market so quickly was because we had really high quality 3D models, and because of our asset pipeline, we could get those right to the sculptors and we could get them out quickly. So like there's benefit like through the whole chain when you use the right technology.
Without question, you could be more efficient with it. You could dream up more. You democratize content, right? Because, you know, when you can get a photoreal real time and you can start to get the cost down, that means more experimental ideas can find their way to an audience because the risk is less, right? It didn't cost $300 million to make it, but it's as imaginative as anything Marvel's produced, right? So, when that day happens, we've now democratized content making, and we can, and this whole idea, this notion that's TikTok is promoting of and YouTube before that, and is this notion that you can create and you can garner attention and you can get an audience and you can get free distribution. And so what happens when somebody on TikTok starts using graphics as good as me to tell stories in a way that's more homegrown? And is that going to dimensionalize our experience as storytellers? Absolutely, because it's going to diversify it, right?
So I do wonder about that. So this is something, because now we're just going off now. Like, this is something I actually wonder about. Like, if the tech gets to the point where the most efficient way, not just to make like a film, but to even just to get the best story and the best performance is to kind of, you might do whatever previs you do, but then maybe you're even shooting it, but you're shooting it even if it's not in a virtual environment, like
right.
Real-time capture is close enough that I don't think we're that far off that, that when you're making the next Extraction movie and you're doing all this crazy choreography and stuff, that you basically end up having, if not the whole movie, a lot of the movie already basically captured in 3D.
Yep.
And then what happens when you put out your edit, your cut of like, here's the story I want you to see, but imagine if people could then go into a virtual space of that and then just kind of watch the whole movie or the whole scene play out and then maybe edit their own cut of it or whatever. Like, imagine if you could go just hang out at the cantina and wait for Luke and Obi-Wan to show up and see if Greedo really shot first and like, and then just kind of maybe cut your own version of it. Like, I think that could have just, some of the stuff that's going to come in the next 10 years is going to be crazy.
Yeah, and it's choose your own narrative, and it will blow your minds. I mean, this is, the focus of Agbo and our partnerships has been with video game companies. We have a tremendous partnership with Nexon. Epic is an investor in us as well. And the reason we did this is because we think that the chocolate and peanut butter of those two industries, when they merge properly, that's where the future of storytelling is going to lie. I don't know. In fact, let me say I'm fairly certain that the future of storytelling is not going to be two-dimensional, and it's not going to be projected, and it's not going to be 2 hours, and it's not going to have a prescribed sort of Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 to it. And I say this with extreme amount of certainty because I have 4 kids, and they're between the ages of 16 and 22. They don't have the same connection to that form of storytelling. They don't have the same connection to a movie theater that I do. They don't have that emotional experience. They will watch it on the toilet. They'll watch it in a plane. They'll watch it in the back of a car. They'll watch it waiting in line at the DMV. They don't care, and they don't care if the screen's this big or the screen's this big or the screen's this big or it's their computer, right? They just receive storytelling in a very different way. So they're disruptive. Their thinking's disruptive. And I think they, like us, crave immersion. Sort of, we were geeks growing up. Geek culture has sort of taken over in a way where it's taken this concept of immersion where you walk out of a theater, you put down a comic book and go, I want to live there. And we've now turned that into a global desire for people. So I feel like the future is going to be virtual. I don't know that if it's a headset, because that might be only for the more adventurous, to the more introspective of us.
Well, I think it's kind of what you're saying, like in the way I think your kids are consuming stuff. Where like, so what I think about a lot is how leaned out I am versus how leaned in I am, and I think the winning, awesome things that compel us in the future will offer me all sorts of experiences where I can be completely leaned in, meaning like I could have a headset on or whatever. I'm just like, I'm literally in the place, or maybe I'm literally in a physical place that is like that. Or way leaned out, where I could just be kind of casually flipping through something,
Yep.
or whatever, but it allows me to have that full kind of range of, and my own agency almost in a way of like how immersed I allow myself to be, but it still has touch points for me all along the way. And I think that is where you're going to see
What's the
things going.
delivery system, you think, in the future? AR, VR, right? Like, we all want to be immersed. We know that. The tech points towards, like I said, something that you wrap your head into, but maybe as it gets thinner and thinner, right? And it's less of a burden, and you don't kill yourself running into a wall, right? But it feels like AR will also be probably the more significant of the two, because you can actually interact, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely biased towards, like, because I wear glasses, right? And the reason I haven't even got LASIK or anything at this point is just because, I don't know, like whenever I put my contacts in, if I'm staring at a screen, it hurts my eyes. But I think if it could get to a form factor that's kind of more like this,
Yep.
and this could have, whether that means there's like some puck or something in my pocket that's the battery and the CPU or whatever, but like this, I think, starts to be an acceptable human form factor. And also then you could have your own style, you could have whatever, like that maybe could be the thing. So it's probably, in my mind, it's some blend of AR, VR, and you could opaque out when you need to, or I don't know. We'll see.
Well, it's a blend of your reality with your entertainment and your desire for immersion, so that if you're wearing your glasses, I'm wearing my glasses, and 20 other people in here, and we're all playing the same game during our day, right? And then when we run into each other, I can hurl a fireball at you that you and I see, right? Because we're wearing our glasses. Like, I feel like that's where we're headed. I feel like, too, when AI gets involved, and, I've said this, and even though you're right, like, you don't want to be Luke Skywalker, but what if you went to the theater, and we've talked about this a lot, too, and it was you,
Yes.
right? It was your avatar, and so, you could, based on technology, reading your presence in some space, you were the star of the content.
Well, even if you weren't the star, like, look, like Joe was awesome, and Joe and Anthony let me be in one tiny little snippet of Endgame.
He's a wizard.
I'm a wizard, right? And like for that second and a half or whatever, that's one of the most uniquely weird things, at least I've experienced as a human, is like, holy crap, like that's me on that screen. But imagine when the future is rendered in real time, and even now, like when you're watching a film in a theater, that's not like, it's a digital file.
Right.
Like there's no reason you couldn't re-upload that file to the theater every day, every showing, every whatever. There's no reason that components of that couldn't be being rendered in real time as you're watching it. And even like a lot of our TVs now, like the Samsung I just got, like there's enough CPU processing power in that to probably render a lot of what I'm seeing as it's happening in real time, right? And so what you're saying is, I think, totally possible, where it could be like, I have some app or something, and it's like, oh, you're sitting in this theater, or you're sitting in this living room, and this is your avatar, and this is how you want to appear. Watch Endgame, because somewhere in the movie, you're going to be in there. You're going to be in the battle, and maybe everyone even in the theater with you are like, oh my gosh, that's my mom fighting Thanos. Oh man, that's like that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a little gimmicky, but it's freaking cool.
It also raises your emotional.
That's
like
right.
I said, if we're looking at the again, emotional investment as our guide, our golden mean for understanding whether we'll be successful or not in our storytelling, it adds value. I do feel like, though, we are going to move away from a collective experience physically, and probably because the one thing that's really important about like putting on a headset and getting immersed is that it's borderless, right? So I can have friends that are not in geographic proximity to me. I can play with people who are not in geographic proximity to me. I can't, it's sort of supersedes government because they can't tell me not to unless they control, my means for receiving the internet. But so I can meet with someone else that I may not otherwise be able to meet with or interact with. And I think the allure of that and the power of that is going to be profound once we perfect it. And that's why I think that you'll start moving into more of a digital space for receiving storytelling. It won't be two-dimensional in that space once the glasses or whatever it is. And I do think there'll be a sliding scale of how you receive it, whether it's like fully immersed or partially immersed. It's going to be a critical factor, but it's all tech-driven, and it's all about adoption.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, look, we know this, but like for me, so I have children as well, ranging from 22 to 11, and when my teenagers, when they were teenagers, I was so grateful for Destiny from Bungie because it really, really allowed me to just connect with my kids because we would play it together. We'd have these incredible experiences. So much of that is what inspired, I think, a lot of the thinking of like what led to Fortnite and what we were thinking there. But even that, like we'd be running raids. It'd be me, my 2 sons, and then 3 other people and we'd have different kind of raid groups that we'd be playing with. But I made true friendships with people that were spread out all across the planet. There were some that I didn't even meet for years. And when we did, it was just like,
Right.
It was almost like sobbing because of the experiences that we'd had together. And like, this is the power of, I think, distributed entertainment. And it just breaks down all barriers, and it's amazing.
Yeah, I was at the Fox Labs, I think it was like 6 years ago, and we're looking at a VR headset, and it was an experience. It was just a very simple experience that lasted like 3 or 4 minutes. It wasn't narrative driven, but there was clearly, I was in some fantasy space. I was in a field. There was, looked like a burned village, and then there was a woman who was kneeling at the edge crying, and I could approach her, and I could look at her, and she couldn't interact with me, but I could be in really close proximity to her. And it was really profound and moving. And I took that headset off, and I went, oh, shit, I'm fucked. Like, I can't do that with a two-dimensional, I can't give you that same level of, like, immersion where, yes, we have learned over the years to watch something, a dog dies on television, and, we're all crying. Or something's on a projected screen and Tony Stark dies after 10 years, and there's an emotion attached to it, but I can't get to that level of immersion where, like, I don't know, I play horror games on VR because I love VR, and I'm not scared ever by anything. I have really low blood pressure, but man, I can only last about 30 minutes before I have to take it off. It's just too much. Like, my anxiety levels are too high. Again, I can't get that. I can't get that in a movie theater, and I don't know that I could give it to you.
Well, and that's kind of what I think there's going to be. I just think different mediums and different presentations of narrative and of conceit are better in sometimes different mediums, and which is why I think what's going to happen is somebody is going to create an IP from the ground up that was built from day one to be fully blended storytelling. Yep. It's going to be a film, or even it's whatever the format is.
That's
it's going to
the
be
future.
It's going to be a 2.5 to 3 hour pilot that's shown however it's shown, that then leads into episodes that then blend back into longer episodes that are all fused together with some virtual world underneath it, and it all feeds into each other and back and forth.
And it all happens right around the same time, or strategically dropped.
That's exactly
in a window that supercharges its.
And it influences each other. Like, imagine some of like the events type stuff that we do in Fortnite. Imagine some huge scale event that then reflects back into the next episode of the thing you're seeing, and back and forth. Like, that is going to be, I think, kind of the moment that all industries just go, that's it. That's the sea change moment.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about the future of the business, because I think it's important. I mean, we made very strategic moves at Agbo pointing towards what my brother and I think is the future. And again, I'll talk about our deal with Nexon, which is really significant for us, because I believe the way that you do that when you synergize transmedia, when you synergize all those different components into a way that's seamless with a unified asset pipeline and a delivery system where you can drop them on, you control it, and that's the future. That's the next step. Before we get into like the crazy stuff I was talking about, where you're the character, I think that's the step after that. But the next step, right? Yep. And that is to me, when you look at like what's happening in the traditional film space versus what's happening in the gaming space, that the gaming space checks more boxes to get to that next phase than the traditional film and TV studios do, right? Because I think brick and mortar isn't as important of an issue moving forward. Like I said, I don't think they understand technology in the same way. They don't house it the same way. Gaming studios are more fluid. Technology is the driver. Technology is going to be the driver for content creation and the unified asset pipeline. And delivery system and distribution. Gaming understands immersive more than traditional film studios do.
Yep.
They know how to put butts in a seat where you have a collective experience, but I don't know that they understand the value of immersion the same way. And as the scales tilt this way, I think it's a gaming company, in my opinion, that is going to be the most powerful, potent media company in the world in the next decade. You look at how quickly Netflix accelerated. I think some gaming companies are going to get rocket fuel pretty soon here, and they're gonna be on Mars.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do. That's what I think. I think it's on us. I think it's on us as an industry to. I think we have, whatever for the last almost 50 years, been really creating a lot of the language of how to kind of do this stuff. And then I really think like my most core thing is it's not what you're doing, it's who you're doing it with. Yeah. That's why I like working with Joe, like, because it's like you find the right partners, you find the right people, because there are like-minded people. Joe's out there, right? There's people out there that really, really understand how to create compelling characters and tell a great story and I think it's really, to me, it's like we have to fuse all the things we've learned, honestly, in the last couple thousand years of like how to shape a great experience, and then fuse that with real time, and then that will be the thing that propels us forward. But I agree with you. I think it's going to be. Most people are just too entrenched and too risk averse to try the crazy stuff. But our whole industry is built on crazy, right? And so like we're the ones that should do it.
And we're on the cusp of that disruptive moment where if you don't try the crazy stuff, you're going to get left behind.
That's right.
And it's happening already. And there are like, studios limping around that don't know they're dead, and they're going to get chopped up and sold for parts real soon here, I don't see that on the gaming side. What I see on the gaming side is innovation and a push towards, what's next, what else can we do, what else is accomplishable. And so it's just more exciting partnerships. But there's also, like I said, an alignment. A strategic alignment with the way that we see the future and the way that our partners see the future. So I know we're got about 10 minutes left here. Should we open it up to questions? We can also keep talking, too, if nobody has any questions. But
yep.
Figure we might. I don't know if you could raise your hand and stand up. I think we have.
Yeah, and then say it loud so we can hear you. And we'll repeat the questions back for everyone.
Okay. Hi. I'm curious with the unified pipeline and that concept of having like a massive pool of content from which we can just basically do anything we want. What are your thoughts, though, about some of the difficult issues we have, like different regimes like China, for example, with the different content rules they have and like the restrictions on the internet and things like that? So how do you see that playing out? Because I know in my work, it's a huge challenge right now in terms of like versioning between what's reality in one market versus reality in another, even though we all, at the consumer level, they all want to just do the same thing. But then you have all these kind of levels of bureaucracy that kind of get in the way. And so I'm curious your thoughts of like how you see us navigating that space in the near future, when I think you're right, a lot of people want to see basically just this content pool from which we can draw.
Yeah, that's a really complex question.
It's a very complex question.
But
no more questions.
Yeah.
No, just kidding.
It has, there's a lot of answers, right? Because depending on how you're talking about it. One, I think, depending on where you are in the world, everyone has a VPN now, right? So there are ways to access content if you want to really access content. I think what's compelling about, like, I've been in the crypto space for years, and I love the spirit and the mentality behind, decentralization. And I love the blockchain because it's really like a free internet where anyone can do anything they want, they can build upon it. And it's tough to control. So I think, as creators, it's just our job to keep making content under the assumption that, if people want to find it, they're going to. Concern ourselves less with politics, because I find if you start mixing politics with creative, right, you get stinky creative. So, it's really, I think, just keep trying to dream and keep trying to find delivery systems that people can find access to if they want to find access to it.
Yeah, and to me, it's really just like, it's kind of what Joe is saying, where it's just how do we just really make really immersive entertainment? And I know this is just a simple example, but if I'm watching some awesome movie, and even just some scene is taking place in just a very, whatever, let's say the scene was set right here, but the asset needed to make the stage and to make the screens and all this stuff virtually, like if those same assets could be used from pre-production to final production, and then also could be the same, literally the same asset that I use when I go to the place, like that's to me the ultimate, not only just the ultimate magic trick, but will unleash just storytelling and creativity and immersiveness in a way that we're not getting to now. And so
where
that to
someone
me is the
could take
focus.
those assets, like you said earlier,
and then
make
where you
their
go
own
from there.
content.
Exactly.
Right? That's what I was talking about earlier about democratizing content. And just,
That's right.
That somebody at any corner of the world could get a hold of those assets or get a hold of an Unreal Engine and tell a story. We have another question over here.
Hi, this is Shannon Lau with the Washington Post. Thank you for speaking. I know you say you don't really believe in the metaverse. I'm curious about both of your perspectives on NFTs. What do you think about those?
It's another complicated question. No more questions. Yeah. I think the metaverse is just like a catchphrase for virtual, right? The virtual space, virtual real estate. I mean, that's stuff we've all been, if you're either a gaming geek or you work in the gaming space, you've been peddling that for years, So it's not it's not something new just because some, company uses it to try to save their business. Doesn't mean, oh, there I go again. Doesn't mean that, this is some grand idea that they've just, plucked out of thin air and are going to bring to the masses. NFTs, I have a harder time understanding only because I haven't seen the quality of work yet that I go, oh, if I buy that JPEG and the market crashes and I'm stuck with a $50,000 JPEG, I'm really happy about that, I don't see like the quality of work yet where the monkey with a cigar is really, the thing that I'm gonna talk to all my friends about. But I think it's certainly the concept behind it is setting the stage for bigger ideas. And I do think when credible, and it's not saying it's not all credible, but a lot of it is not credible at the moment. There's some great artists working in that space. But I don't think it's ubiquitous yet. And so I think it represents big ideas, but I don't think it's going to stay in the form that it's in. I think it will evolve into something else.
Yeah, I think over the last 6,000-8,000 years or so, we seem to, as a species, put a lot of stock in in owning something. I don't know what that means in a digital world, but it is. I think it's we're in the early days. It's a lot of fumbling around, and it will. If there's value in it, it will present itself in the right way eventually.
Yeah. It's almost like a test case for avatars, right? Like something you're just buying, digital. It's similar to digital real estate, right? You're just buying something that exists in the space that's unique, has a unique stamp that can represent you. We think ultimately that's going to be your avatar, and maybe your AI buddy, that's there to defend you against evil AI that's trying to fuck up your life, that those things will replace this concept of NFTs, which are I still think sort of 1.0. Is there another question out there? Yeah.
Hi, thanks for the talk. You've worked in the MCU, and based on the success of that, we saw a lot of companies trying to create their own universes. Not all of them worked.
Right.
And I wanted to get your perspective on the type of franchise management that really made those films successful. We've talked about Star Wars on this panel a little bit. I feel like they've had some misses hitting that same kind of cadence where everything feels prescient and necessary to that next step. So I was curious, if you got to control the franchise management on Star Wars, what would you do?
Well, it's tricky because it requires to just say we have a universe. It requires an incredible amount of work, and we could talk about this in context of Fortnite as well on the gaming side, because that's also a universe that's evolving, that has an overarching narrative, and that Donald has made countless innovations in the gaming space around it. But talking about Kevin Feige running the Marvel universe or Donald running the Fortnite universe, there's always a creative engine behind it that is passionate about the material, lives for that material, right? Bleeds for that material, and then understands how to also collaborate with others in a way that this experiment, this mosaic that Marvel created over a 10-year period. And I can't speak specifically to Star Wars, so I'll just talk about Marvel, because that was the level of experience I had. That's just an experiment. Kevin went, well, what if I took a bunch of movie stars and I built a bunch of different franchises, and then I took those separate franchises and I blended them into an overarching narrative, and then I had touchstone movies where they all got together, and then they jumped into each other's movies. That had never been done before. But also to do it, the amount of work involved requires, Ryan Coogler and us and James Gunn and, Taika and everyone else that's come along to play in that universe going, well, I'm going to take the ball and I'm going to run with it over here. And Kevin going, oh, that's cool. Then I'll give the ball to this person over here and they're going to run with it that way. But, we're all staying within these we all understand what the rules are and what the integrity is behind the storytelling. That's really compelling. Yours is a little different in that, it's more of a singular, you're a director with a giant universe. So I think
but
it's
even
good
with
to
that, I
contrast
think it's a
these, right?
similar mindset of just of how, because even through the different seasons and different things, it's basically saying how do you have a large kind of planned out arc, but then be flexible enough along the way to allow other voices and collaborators to come in and really kind of weave through it while just kind of keeping,
And affected in ways you're not expecting.
And affected in ways you're not expecting, and then being able to kind of move with it and be
Right.
flexible along that way. And it's really, I think it's just embracing partnership and finding great partners and planning it.
And
It's
I
hard.
think if there's anything that is the key to Marvel's success, I think it's surprising the audience and taking risks. Because you don't want to go in and see the thing you could read in a book, and you don't want to go in and see the thing you're expecting to see. And I remember when Infinity War came out, and I felt like I wanted to go into hiding for 2 or 3 weeks because there were people ripping their shirts off and screaming at the end of it in movie theaters, saying they wanted to kill us, because they were so angry. They clearly weren't expecting the ending we gave them, and that surprise is what then led to the enormous success in the box office of Endgame.
I remember you saying something to me a couple of years ago. You said, look, and I'm going to butcher how you said it because you said it perfectly. You're like, every 6-year-old on the planet has a master's degree in story at this point.
Yeah.
They've seen so much, they've seen it all. It's so hard to surprise them. And I think it's why, not just how you ended Infinity War, but literally that first, 15, 18 minutes of Endgame, where it's like, we're just going to take you right to where you assume the movie's going to end, and then we're going to literally chop Thanos' head off, and then you don't know what's going to happen next.
Right.
And I thought it was so brilliant, but yeah.
That was the challenge of, surprising ourselves, surprising the audience. I think we have time for one last question, and then we'll wrap it up here. Yeah.
Hi, Joe.
Hi.
Kat Bailey from IGN. My question is, you were talking earlier about IP, various characters that were being cut across movies and television and gaming. And I'm wondering, and it made me think about the multiverse trend in Spider-Man No Way Home and a lot of other movies. And I'm wondering how much of this is a good thing, or too much of a good thing, when you're bringing back all of these characters from past IP and trying to make them new again.
It's hard because I don't know, we would always struggle with this notion, right? Hence, killing half the characters or chopping Thanos' head off 20 minutes in. Well, what are the expectations? Because if we're just going to meet expectations, then what are we doing, right? And we're spending way too much money to just meet expectations. We have to wildly exceed those expectations. So yes, it's tricky because there's a battle that constantly goes on between a corporate agenda and a creative, right? And the corporate agenda is, you like chocolate ice cream? Here's chocolate ice cream with chocolate on top. Here's chocolate ice cream with fudge on it. Here's chocolate ice cream with, right? And so the corporate agenda lacks innovation and it lacks imagination because its job is to turn the money printer on, right? The money printer's got to go brr, right? The creative's job is to go, well, shit, I don't know that I want to watch that. So I don't know that I want to spend 2 years of my life making that. So unless I can do something surprising here, I don't know that we're going to link up here. And so the challenge is to push back against the money printer and to say, hey, I want to try something really radical here. And I have a hunch that it may make you even more money than you expect if we surprise the audience. So yes, too much of one thing is a bad thing. But I think there's enough creatives and innovators in the space that you will constantly be surprised. I just wouldn't expect corporations to surprise you.
Well said. I agree.
I think that's our
Yep. Thank you,
dinner
everyone.
with Andre, right?